On the morning of September 16, 1994, Ariel Primary School was settling into another ordinary day. The school sat on the outskirts of Rua, a small rural town not far from Harare, Zimbabwe. It was quiet, well-kept, and unremarkable, the kind of place known only to the families who sent their children there. Nothing suggested it would ever become part of a global mystery. It was a school defined by routine, by lessons, playtime, and the predictable rhythm of childhood. Just after 10 o'clock, the children were released for their morning break. As usual, teachers remained inside the staff room. The playground was considered safe. The grounds were open, bordered by scrubland and trees, with no nearby roads and very little outside foot traffic. Dozens of children poured out into the open space, running, talking, playing games, doing what kids do when adults aren't watching too closely. That's when something interrupted the normal flow of the morning. Several children noticed movement beyond the edge of the school grounds. At first, it didn't seem important. The sky wasn't empty on most days, and children pointed things out to one another all the time. But this was different. It was lower, quieter, and closer than anything they were used to seeing. Some of the children later said they saw an object descend and come to rest just beyond the trees. Others described more than one. They spoke of silver, disc-shaped objects that reflected the light and did not move like any normal aircraft. As they watched, the atmosphere in the playground completely shifted. Children began calling others over. Small groups formed, pointing turned into raised voices. What started as curiosity spread into confusion, and for some, genuine fear. Whatever they were seeing did not fit into anything familiar, and with no adults nearby. There was no explanation to replace what their own minds were forming. Then came the figures. Multiple children described small beings emerging near the objects. They were dark in color, with large heads and enormous black eyes. The children said the figures moved strangely, not walking in a way they recognized, but gliding, appearing and disappearing behind the trees, as if the environment itself wasn't behaving properly. Some children ran, others froze, and a few captivated moved closer, unable to look away. The encounter didn't last long, maybe just a few minutes, but eventually the objects were gone. The sky returned to normal. The trees stood still again. Playground looked the same as it had before, but the children did not. The bell rang to end the break. Many refused to go back inside. Some were crying, others were visibly shaken, and a few were just excited, talking over one another. Teachers immediately noticed the change in their behavior, but none of them had seen anything unusual themselves. From their point of view, something had clearly happened. But whatever it was, it had happened out of their sight. When the children began to talk, the stories poured out. At first, teachers assumed it was just imagination, a shared story sparked by excitement, or a game. That explanation usually works. But as the staff listened more closely, a pattern began to emerge. Children who hadn't been standing together described the same objects, similar figures, and similar movements. Their accounts overlapped without matching perfectly, which made them much harder to dismiss as being rehearsed. Parents were contacted, and by that afternoon, the school was filled with concern. Families gathered, and the stories were repeated at home, sometimes through tears, sometimes with a calm, unshakable certainty. Many parents expected the accounts to change overnight, to soften or collapse under questioning, but they didn't. Over the following days, investigators and psychologists were allowed to speak with the children. Each child was interviewed individually and asked to describe what they had seen, and then to draw it. The drawings were strikingly similar, showing disc-shaped objects, large-eyed figures, trees, and the open ground of the schoolyard. One of the most notable interviews was conducted by a Harvard psychiatrist who traveled to Zimbabwe to speak with the children directly. He approached the case cautiously, focusing less on what the experience meant and more on how the children described it. What stood out to him was not hysteria or exaggeration. The children were calm, measured, and consistent. Some even described receiving messages that weren't spoken aloud, but felt messages about the environment, about harm to the earth, and about the future. Others didn't mention this at all. There was variation, but the core of the experience remained remarkably stable across dozens of testimonies. As weeks passed, the story did not collapse. The children didn't gain fame. There were no television deals, no publicity tours. and no obvious incentive to keep telling the same story. Years passed, then decades. When many of the children were interviewed again as adults, the question was simple: had their memories changed? For most of them, the answer was a clear no. Some had tried to rationalize it, some explored psychological explanations, and some still believed it was exactly what they thought it was at the time. Others admitted they didn't know what it was, only that it happened. What makes the Ariel school incident so difficult to categorize isn't the lack of an explanation, but the lack of erosion. Many mass sightings fade over time. Details blur, confidence weakens, and stories bend under repeated telling. This one didn't. No adult ever confirmed seeing anything unusual that day. No physical evidence was ever recovered, and no official explanation ever closed the case. And yet, the experience remained remarkably intact in the memories of those who were there. This is usually where people rush to conclusions. Some take it as definitive proof of extraterrestrial visitation, while others dismiss it as mass imagination or suggestion. But both of those responses skip over something quieter and much more interesting. The children weren't trying to convince anyone, and they weren't performing. They were describing something that made sense to them at the time, using the language and understanding they had available. They didn't invent a story in a vacuum. They responded to an experience they simply could not contextualize. No authority stepped in quickly enough to tell them what they had seen. And no explanation arrived in time to replace the very first one they formed themselves. So the memory stayed where it began, at the edge of the playground, in the moment before anyone else took control of the story. After everything you've heard, the real question isn't just what happened that day, it's what you believe happened. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I did, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next dive into the unexplained. See you next time.